From Francis Schaeffer's The Great Evangelical Disaster. Chapter 1, What Really Matters. Ideas and Actions. We have seen, then, that as Bible-believing Christians, we are locked in a battle in the area of ideas. But in the area of actions, there is a direct parallel. Ideas are never neutral and abstract. Ideas have consequences in the way we live and act, both in our personal lives and in the culture as a whole. There could hardly be a more fitting description of our own culture today than Romans chapter 1. Bent on the pursuit of autonomous freedom from any restraint, and especially from God's truth and moral absolutes, our culture has set itself on the course of self-destruction. Autonomous freedom. How the voices of our day cry out, I must be free to kill the child in my womb. I must be free even to kill the newborn child, even if I don't think he or she measures up to my standards of quality of life. I must be free to desert my husband or wife and abandon my children. I must be free to commit shameless acts with those of my own sex. The last verse really is frightening when we think of it in relationship to our culture today. Although they knew God's righteous decree that those who do such things deserve death, they not only continue to do these very things, but also approve of those who practice them. Make no mistake, we as Bible-believing evangelical Christians are locked in a battle. This is not a friendly gentleman's discussion. It is a life and death conflict between the spiritual hosts of wickedness and those who claim the name of Christ. It is a conflict on the level of ideas between two fundamentally opposed views of truth and reality. It is a conflict on the level of actions between a complete moral perversion and chaos and God's absolutes. But do we really believe that we are in a life and death battle? Do we really believe that the part we play in the battle has consequences for whether or not men and women will spend eternity in hell? Or whether or not, in this life, people will live with meaning or meaninglessness? We must then therefore understand the underlying substance to our reality. That spiritual and physical reality are intimately and intricately intertwined with one another, and Christ is at the center. Or whether or not those who do live will live in a climate of moral perversion and degradation. Sadly, we must say that very few in the evangelical world have acted as if these things are true. Rather than trumpet our accomplishments and revel in our growing numbers, it would be closer to the truth to admit that our response has been a disaster. The new neo-orthodoxy. There is only one way to describe those who no longer hold to a full view of Scripture. Although many of these would like to retain the evangelical name for themselves, the only accurate way to describe this view is that it is a form of neo-orthodox existential theology. Neo-orthodox existential theology. The heart of the neo-orthodox existential theology is that the Bible gives us a quarry out of which to have religious experience, but that the Bible contains mistakes where it touches that which is verifiable, namely history and science. But unhappily, we must say that in some circles this concept now has come into some of that which is called evangelicalism. In short, in these circles, the neo-orthodox existential theology is being taught under the name of evangelicalism. The issue is whether the Bible gives propositional truth, that is, truth, which may be stated in propositions, where it touches history and the cosmos, and this all the way back to pre-Abrahamic history, all the way back to the first 11 chapters of Genesis, or whether instead of that, it is only meaningful where it touches that which is considered religious. T.H. Huxley, the biologist friend of Darwin, the grandfather of Aldous and Julian Huxley, wrote in 1890 that he visualized the day, not far hence, in which faith would be separated from all fact, and especially all pre-Abrahamic history, and that faith would then go on triumphant forever. This is an amazing statement for 1890, before the birth of existential philosophy or existential theology. Huxley indeed foresaw something clearly. I am sure that he and his friends considered this some kind of joke, because they would have understood well that if faith is separated from fact, and specifically pre-Abrahamic space-time history, it is only another form of what we would call today a trip. But unhappily, it is not only the avowedly neo-Orthodox existential theologians who now hold that which T.H. Huxley foresaw, but some who call themselves evangelicals as well. This may come from the theological side in saying that not all the Bible is revelational. Or it may come from the scientific side in saying that the Bible teaches little to nothing when it speaks of the cosmos. This is problematic because we are, in fact, very much so in a spiritual and cosmological warfare. Or it may come from the cultural side in saying that the moral teachings of the Bible were merely expressions of the culturally determined and relative situation in which the Bible was written, and therefore non-authoritative to every area of life today. Martin Luther said, "If I profess with the loudest voice and clearest exposition every portion of the truth of God, except precisely that little point which the world and the devil are at the moment attacking, I am not confessing Christ, however boldly I might be professing Christ. Where the battle rages, there the loyalty of the soldier is proved, and to be steady on all the battlefront, besides, is mere flight and disgrace, if he flinches at that point." Martin Luther. Marking a line. In our day, that point is the question of Scripture. That point which Martin Luther brought out. That where the battle rages, there that the loyalty of the soldier is proved, and to be steady on the battlefront besides. That point to which flight and disgrace, if he flinches at that point, in our day, is the point of the question of Scripture. Holding to a strong view of Scripture, or not holding to it, is the watershed of the evangelical world. The first direction in which we must face is to say most lovingly, but clearly, evangelicalism is not consistently evangelical, unless there is a line drawn between those who take a full view of Scripture and those who do not.